Silicone molds are a great way to make copies of hard-to-find parts or props, but can seem a bit intimidating. In this video, I'm going to show you the basics of two-part silicone mold making and casting with resin. To get started, I place some sulfur-free clay along the bottom edge of my model, and I'm using a sculpting tool to help remove any excess clay. This is done to seal up any gaps that may be present around the base of my piece and will prevent the silicone from getting underneath it. This base my model is attached to provides a nice platform that will ensure the total depth of the model is accounted for in the mold. Once I'm happy with the seal, I'm going to take my hot glue gun and run a bead of glue along the edge of the model before I glue the model to a piece of foam core. This will be the base of our mold box. You could use any rigid surface like cardboard for this part. I'll give the part one last spray of crystal clear to help seal the primer coat, as some paints react with the silicone, and allow it to dry. With my model securely in place and the clear coat dry, it's time to add in the walls of my mold box. I have special walls that I built out of plastic cutting boards, but foam core or cardboard would work just as well. I like to draw out the edges where my walls meet the base to help with identifying where the hot glue should go. A few beads of hot glue to hold the walls in place and seal all the corners to prevent leaking, and it's time to mix up your silicone. It's important to get good glue coverage to help prevent the silicone from leaking out of your mold box, so take your time with this step. I'm using Smooth-On Moldstar 15 Slow, which is an all-around platinum cure silicone with a good amount of working time or pot life and a 4-hour demold time, and is mixed equal parts A and B by weight or volume. A quick spray of mold release, which will help us remove our model and allow it to dry before moving on to pouring our silicone. Pour your silicone into your mold box in as thin a stream as possible. This helps pop any air bubbles that may have been introduced during the mixing process, so that they don't create pockets or bubbles in your mold. Once your box is filled, allow it to set. And let's take a look at two ways to determine how much silicone you'll need for your project. Multiply the length, width, and height of your mold box in inches times 18.5 to equal the total weight of silicone in grams. Then divide that by 2 for parts A and B. If you prefer an easier approach, fill your mold box with rice until your model is covered by a ½ inch, and then pour the rice into a container to get the total volume. Divide in half for parts A and B. Much like the easy version of determining how much silicone you need, the same approach can be applied for resin. And much like silicone, there's just as many types of resin. I'm using Smoothcast 321. Which is a good all-around resin that's mixed equal parts and has a good working and curing time. Before we make our first casting, we need to prep our mold. You can spray mold release or you can coat the mold with baby powder. This is my preferred method since spray mold release leaves a thin film on the cast parts which needs to be washed off before you can paint them. The baby powder leaves no residue and can be painted without additional prep work. As an added bonus, the baby powder helps to draw resin into all the corners and details of your mold to minimize voids and air bubbles. So give your mold a light dusting and brush the powder over the entire surface before blowing out the excess powder. Now back to the resin. With both parts poured, it's time to mix them. You'll want to be aware of the working time of your resin to make sure that you're within the time allowed before the resin begins to cure. To ensure that all of our details are captured and minimize any air bubbles, I like to pour a small amount of resin and slush it around in the mold, making sure to get it into all the corners and anywhere that air might get trapped. Once we've got a good coat, we can pour in the rest. I like to tap the edges of the mold to help remove any air bubbles that may be trapped in the resin. And when I'm fairly confident that there are no bubbles left, I wait patiently for the exothermic reaction to take place. Allow the resin to fully cure before removing it from the mold. You can tell when it's done by the temperature of the silicone. If it's still hot, it's too soon. When it's fully cured, you can pop it out of the mold and pat yourself on the back for a job well done. It's oddly satisfying to pull your first successful casting from a mold, so enjoy it. You've earned it. Okay, that's enough. Let's talk about introducing paint into your resin casting. There's plenty of additives that can be used to alter the resin, including a variety of colors of tints and dyes. But if you just need an outer skin of color, you can spray paint into your mold before adding resin to bond paint to plastic. Start by taking the spray paint of your choice and giving the inside of your mold a good even coat of paint and allowing it to dry. Once the spray paint is fully dried, mix up another batch of resin, pour it into your mold, and allow it to fully cure. When you remove your piece, you'll find that the paint has been bonded to the face of your casting. Pretty neat, right? There's a million different techniques for silicone mold making and casting, and I suggest learning as much as you can about the process before starting your own project. But if you need to make multiples of a part or prop, it can be a great way to approach it. Well, that's going to do it for this video. If you want to see more tutorials like this one, be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and hit the notification bell to get an alert when we put out our next one. And until next time, happy haunting!